Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Iti Namine Namaste Sarasvati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Paskatyadi Shatarine Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada. I think everyone here is pretty familiar with an invocation mantra, but for those maybe tuning in later, it's something that we chant to kind of bring in higher energies, bring in higher vibrations, but it's also something I like to use to connect us together in time and space so that we're really seeing, hearing, and understanding each other in that space. So I think there are some who tuned in last time. I was going to say last week, but I think it's been a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
So for those that don't know me and haven't connected with me before, my name is Lalita. I've been an aspiring Bhakti yogi since 2011. I'm now a counselor and a spiritual coach for women. So in this session, I'll recap the last session because it is a part 2. It is kind of a sequel. So in this session, I wanted to explore a little deeper some action points in how we can not only embrace our emotional world in our bhakti practice, but also create a language around it that helps us to move beyond, any challenges that we may face, because I think it's just such a thing that can keep us stuck, but it's really something that should be moving us forward. So how does that sound to everyone? Is everyone okay with that focal point? I see you nodding, if anyone wanted to. Okay, thanks for the thumbs up. Yeah, very nice.
I'm always the one who's putting these thumbs up, so it's interesting to actually see it on the other side.
Oh, it's very cool.
Sorry,
it's
because I'm joining from work, so I can't speak throughout the whole session. No
problem at all. Thank you for letting us know. We won't call upon you to answer something. So what was I going to say? So it's definitely something that it is a sequel. It's a part 2, and so it's definitely something we want to recap over, go deeper into, because it's such a big topic. So I think in the last session we explored some principles around trauma, like what trauma is and how it impacts us in various different ways. So we will definitely get to some points in how we can combat this and start to really work on this even by ourselves. But first I wanted to go through just more ways that it kind of can impact us. So just to do a quick recap. So trauma is something that happens too much, too fast, and too soon for us to be able to process in the moment in real time. And often what happens, we make it mean something that it doesn't actually mean. So You could have had experiences growing up, as well as in a partnership, you know, an intimate partnership where you were told that maybe something was wrong with you, or you had someone just leave you out of the blue, and maybe that, you know, made you feel unworthy, unlovable, and abandoned. So these are types of trauma filters. Okay, so we have that lens over the top of what we're already seeing, and so I'll be referring to that quite a bit throughout that term trauma filter. So just remember what that means, but of course I'm happy to go over it again if you need me to. So let's dive in. I'm just making sure I'm going over my notes here. Okay, so the first thing I wanted to talk about was is language. Okay, so language is something that creates consciousness. And if you were, so does that make sense when I say that language is something that creates consciousness? And if you think about what, you know, as connecting in as a devotee and creating a devotee practice, or even if you're someone who's, again, tuning in from it and you're practicing something different, what kind of language do you use? And I'm not talking about Sanskrit or Bengali or how we kind of interpret that with the diacritics, how we try and, you know, express that. I'm more talking about how it makes you feel. Yeah, what some of the feelings that come up as a result of that. Like, I'll just give an example. The Australian language, oh my goodness, of course, yes, it's English, but how we express it, it's quite harsh and rough and masculine and to the point. I was just kind of laughing about this with Uru a little bit, actually, before we jumped on the call. So does that make sense, what I'm talking about? And what comes to mind when you think of language creates consciousness?
The language we're kind of using to describe everything we think in language, everything we're processing through language. So language creates consciousness. I mean, like, this is how we're trying to like understand our situation. And many times our language will be like, how to say, if we're having negative language, our consciousness will go down. And if we're having like positive language, then our consciousness can be elevated. This is what came to my mind.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, for sure. And is there anyone tuning in that doesn't practice Bhakti solely? Maybe they're practicing something else?
Me, I practice devotional service to Maya.
Okay. Talking about like Ashtanga, you know, maybe Kriya. I think we touched on it a little bit last time. I'm just wondering if anyone's, yeah, what they kind of feel. It's okay.
Yeah, I have a question regarding the language and what you and Uru mean. Do you mean something like self-talk? Is that a type of language that we use, like depending on how we feel on that particular day, or if there's been a trigger related to the trauma, the language that we use towards ourselves? Is that something that you mean regarding that?
Yes,
Or
absolutely. Yes, yes, self-talk for sure creates consciousness, doesn't it? For sure. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely. That's a really good one. So yeah, is there anyone else who wanted to share anything? I just want to make sure I pause so I'm interacting and not just talking constantly. So what happens when we have this really high, profound, you know, culture and consciousness and language like Bhakti, but we've got those trauma filters over the top of that? Okay, so it's something we're going to go into. So what happens is that, you know, we've got this high, really beautiful, profound culture and way to connect with one another, the etiquette, you know, it's just so advanced, you know, like our acharyas, all the examples that they're giving in devotion, respect, admiration, awe, reverence. But if we have these trauma filters over the top, or this lack of framework or connection with self, what we do, we can, you know, what happens to this high vibe transcendental consciousness? What's something that, like, what are some of your experiences that you've had? I hope I'm making enough of an example, but it's like this high, really powerful, incredible practice. And again, maybe someone's tuning in that's, you know, practicing something, and they've noticed that there's this gap between themselves and that practice and the things that are coming up in between. Does that make sense?
I guess I don't know if what I'm about to say will make sense, because sometimes, like, if something will trigger a memory of the past trauma, as you said, like feeling unworthy and everything, it's the opposite of how we should feel. But for me, it's helped me rely more on Hari and Guru, because when we're feeling down, I mean, who else can we go to for help, right? So, but at the same time, it's like, am I doing, like, you feel like you're doing something wrong because you're not supposed to be having those feelings, but something will just automatically trigger it. Is that right?
I love you. It's not about being right. It's just about being so authentic and honest and so aware in which you are. Thank you so much for sharing that. That's, yeah, it's such a beautiful, beautiful example. And I'm happy I'm making sense to some degree, because it's such a subtle thing. And I'm trying to make sure I'm including people that also aren't, you know, practicing what we're practicing, but maybe have, you know, spiritual principles that are very high, and they want to move towards that. But yes, like you're saying, there are things that are coming up within that are really, yeah, basically there's bridging that gap, and am I doing the right thing, and there's, you know, perhaps that negative self-talk there. So basically, this is a big one that happens, and we did touch on it a little bit in the last talk. So what happens is we often negate, neglect, abandon, and completely bypass our emotional world or sense of self for that higher taste, because it's so you know, it connects us. Has anyone had that experience? I hope you have, otherwise you maybe wouldn't be here. But if you've had that experience where you've just felt so connected in your spiritual practice, you felt so immersed, and it meets all of those needs, you know, it's really taking you away from those feelings of lack or disconnection, and you're really feeling that yeah, that deep connection, and it feels like you're connecting with yourself. Does that make sense? Has everyone had that kind of experience?
Yeah, I had this kind of experience, but it doesn't last long. It's like it's kind of a blissful experience, but it's like very, very short-lived.
Yeah, I hear you. I totally hear you. So for how long? How long does it last for you?
Maybe as long as I remember, it goes for like some days, some couple of days, and then again this whole material things and all of things come back. Yeah.
It comes in. I notice how you just said material things there. Okay, I will definitely come back to that. Thank you. No, it's a really good point. It's a really, really good point. Is there anyone else that wanted to share their experiences of having that really high, like blissful connection, but then kind of, coming back to my mind, coming back to things?
Absolutely. It's good to hear other people say it, because you feel like when you don't talk about it, you feel like you're the only one. Like sometimes you feel
Yes.
like it's been a few days and then you realize, wait a second, have I been distant with others? And then you feel like, well, this is so good. I don't feel like talking to anybody. Then you like, should I, shouldn't I? You feel like, am I doing something wrong? Should I connect with others? Should I just stay here? Like I don't know.
Yeah.
It's hard to explain, but I guess you guys understand.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's very much, yeah, it can be very hard to gauge. And that's the thing. It's this process of cleaning the heart. And all the dust coming up and trying to make sense of it. But that's the thing, if we have those filters, those lenses over the top, we're not only cleaning the dust, but we actually don't have a framework of self to come back to if we have those trauma filters. I'm not saying everyone here does, and to varying different degrees, but we'll come back to those, and it makes that process of cleansing the heart so much more painful, challenging, overwhelming. We can really swing from those stages, and it will really make our relationships suffer. But anyway, we will get into this. Is there anyone else that wanted to share? As much as possible, I wanted to make this a safe space for people to share what's happening, and again, really create that consciousness through our language of connecting with one another about where we are at. And yes, we have this beautiful practice and this amazing examples, in our sadhana, in our practice, from these amazing acharyas. But we have to start with where we are, and we have to create a language of expression for where we are. So is there anyone else that wanted to share? It's totally fine if you don't.
I think, yes, I myself have been through all those emotions, obviously trauma one after the other, I would say. I have shared some of those things with Urugaya. Urugaya must be remembering that. And I think it's very hard because on one hand, you are practicing spirituality, you trying to understand what's the purpose of your life and how you connect with Krishna, and what sort of, what exactly you need to do at this point of time. But then you're also conflicted somewhere in your mind and brain, because you're not having the right kind of language, knowledge. And that obviously has to start since the very beginning, which is somewhere lacking, I would say. So I think it's very hard, yes, to acknowledge what's happening around. And then also lack of association also makes it more harder. That's what I would definitely say, because you're sometimes not really engaging with I would say, that just, I shouldn't be saying that like-mindedness sometimes doesn't really happens.
Oh, it is such a challenging one. Yeah, that last point that you made, that is a challenging one of a like mind, where we've been here since time immemorial. And yeah, we've got such vast experiences and karmas, and to have even 1, 2, or 3 really good friends, what to speak of, that are practicing the same sadhana as yourself, that's huge. It's really, really huge. And then on top of that, if you've got those trauma filters, like I'm abandoned, alone, I'm unworthy, what kind of connections are we actually going to attract into our lives? Or they can really be, just devastate us even further. And like you were saying, that trauma one after another. So yes, that's really, really good points. And I'm glad that made sense in terms of cleansing the heart and how it all comes up, but we just don't maybe have those tools to kind of deal with what's coming up. Yeah. And thank you so much for sharing that. And I'm sorry, you're having those experiences currently.
Thank you so much for hearing, Lalita. Thank you. I hope
You're so welcome, and we're going to have some points at the very end where you can take notes and really start applying it. Some practical tools. I'm all about practical tools, because it's oh my goodness, there's so much fluff out there, and there's so much people just talking about it, and there's nothing, it just kind of re-triggers you all over again, and there's no action points that actually empower you to go deeper and to take the reins of your emotional world and move forward, and really move forward. So I'm really looking forward to sharing that with all of you. And welcome, Hannah. I'm so happy that you're here. I just saw your name pop up. I'm so happy you're here. Would anyone else like to share anything before we move to that next phase, that next topic? Sorry, I can't see. Yes, is it Uru?
Wrong.
Oh, sorry about that.
No, I just raised it. No, sorry, please. It's just my honor to share with all of you. So Thank you. I was thinking about, it's so vital to have friends. You just mentioned to have even a few friends is very important in spiritual circle or even material. Now, as I interact with people, I'm realizing, it's not just, you may form friends not because you feel lonely, then others may look down upon you. What kind of person is he? Even the materialists, the outside devotees, they consider, you should be happy with yourself. And then, yes, you can form friends just to increase your happiness. But it's not that, our self-talk is very important, we should be happy. And because even I am now, I should not be judging people, but I am seeing, like, if I have to form friend with someone, if somebody has a depressed speech, I may feel as a compassionate person, maybe I could help that person, but then I feel I may become negatively impacted as well if the person is feeling depressed or, has some financial issues, health, or, feel not very good. So I feel like it may be better off not to be friend with such a person, but just
It's
be
a real
friends with
art
devotees.
to give association and not take. I think that, that's a really strong point in terms of, Vaishnava etiquette, within the Bhakti culture, and perhaps there's other terms, but it's really such a thing for Bhakti yogis, because it's all about the heart and we feel so much, it's really a part of our practice to have that compassion towards others. So it can be such a challenging one to, really juggle. Okay, do I give service here, or do I give to this person here, or do I actually take care of myself? Yeah, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, something on those lines. And like, I can't recognize then, should I be judging people? Some very rare people may tell that they are not feeling good about themselves and all those things. But mostly people on the outside, they may say, we are doing very well, we are very happy with our lives. But internally, I know, like, there are challenges, everybody has it. And social media people just show the positive side of how they are having fun in their lives. And, so a kind of the language, you were talking about language, the consciousness. So I, sometimes find myself in a dilemma that should I just form friends with only devotees, or I can go beyond and look towards non-devotees also. Because if I go and associate with non-devotees, I risk myself getting their contaminated consciousness. But I feel everybody can have certain good qualities. They may be more kind than devotees sometimes, even the non-devotees. So
Yeah, it's an
I'm not
interesting.
sure, dilemma kind of. Judging
Yeah,
people, broadening your spectrum of friends from just devotees to non-devotees, because I'm not very much having personal association of devotees, physical in-person association. So that's a kind of dilemma I face in my life. Thank you. If you could address that.
Yeah, sure. I will touch on it a little bit before we move forward.
Okay.
Definitely, it is a real conundrum for sure. And it's something that I've personally gone through as well. And I can honestly just say it's really important to know yourself and your own needs and what you need to fill yourself up. And as much as you can, fill yourself up with those needs and connect them with Krishna, and trust that Krishna will align you with the right people that are going to be of the same values and morals. And right, like for myself, I really struggled. They found such beautiful people that were so wonderful that weren't practicing bhakti, but they eat meat, and it's just not something that I could compromise with. I just couldn't be around it. And so it really impeded our ability to be able to go deeper into a relationship because of those principles. So, but as the deeper I went into the relationship with myself and with Krishna, and just trusting that those needs will be met. And if we do have those strong trauma filters, it's really best for a time that we're not engaging with others or relying on others in any way, you know, even with friends, just really relying on ourselves, relying on Krishna, and going deep into that relationship and trusting that when the time is right, we will attract the right people. But I understand what you're saying in terms of judgment as well. I would be coming back to, okay, where am I judging myself in my life? How am I judging myself? As a tool to come inside and connect more. Does that help?
Thank you so much. Yes.
You're welcome.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. So anyone else that wanted to share just a little bit? I feel like it's nice to just share. It connects everyone with the group and helps you to feel just included, seen and heard, understood. All very important needs. Okay. So let's move forward. So we're talking a little bit about, and I can see that everyone's on, you know, a kind of different different level, and that's fine. It's always hard to bring a group together. But I wanted to really talk about that principle of, you know, spiritual bypassing, which is definitely a really popular topic, you know, in different schools of thought. But it's something that I find is really, just so prominent if we have those trauma filters. So we spoke about a little bit how so much comes up and we don't know how to kind of navigate through that. It's, you know, there are all sorts of trials and tribulations that come with that. So what I wanted to talk about is we have this tribal consciousness that we go into when we first connect with a spiritual practice, and then as we move forward, the cleansing of the heart begins. Like the honeymoon phase is kind of over, as they say in the relationship, and we start to go a little deeper. And if we don't have that framework of self, if we don't know ourselves, then what's going to happen is this tribal consciousness. So the principles of tribal consciousness is honor, loyalty, and justice. So it really happens in any type of group. It doesn't matter if, you know, the principles are really high and exalted. Those elements or those principles of a tribe will be there. And if we don't, again, have that framework, that's what we'll come back to, is this is this tribe, and we'll keep trying to put that energy out and to try and get those needs met, to try and connect with ourselves. And what we end up doing is giving our power away, exhausting ourselves in exchange for safety, validation, to be seen and heard. But we ultimately end up exhausting ourselves and just really not being able to go deeper with Krishna at the end of the day, or deeper into our sadhana, deeper into our spiritual practice. And that's the thing with tribal consciousness. There's so much support, there's so much love, there's so much connection, and it really does meet that need. And ultimately, you know, for bhakti yogis, we're connecting with our true nature, we're connecting with that bliss. Oh my goodness, it's just so powerful. I was actually talking to Hannah about it the other night, and just it's just that I can't even find the language for it. There's just no other experience like it, and you just get so immersed in it, and you just want more and more. And it's totally understandable why, if we're already in that pattern of neglecting ourselves or sabotaging ourselves or spiritually bypassing, you know, it's easy for us to kind of get into that pattern with bhakti as well, or with our sadhana. And so our emotional, mental, you know, career, our physical, our family and relationships, all of those things can go onto autopilot, and those trauma filters are then just really in charge of those different areas, and we're just trying to focus on the spiritual and get everything there. So I just wanted to check in and just make sure that makes sense to everyone before I move forward. I speak very quickly and it's very analytical, I find, so I just want to make sure that makes sense for everyone. You can just give like a thumbs up, or you're welcome to jump in. Cool.
Lalita, Sorry,
Yes.
I just wanted to make sure I understood correctly.
Yeah.
Do you mean in the sense that it makes us feel so good that we tend to neglect the other parts of our life, or like we become like our fight and flight responses, like we just don't want to deal with the other things, we just want to deal with our sadhana and bhakti? Is that what you mean?
Yes, yes,
Oh.
that's exactly it. And that's where, as bhaktis, for other practices, it can be a little different, but that's really what it means to spiritually bypass, because, and we're not doing it consciously, we're not doing it intentionally. It's just that we don't even know, like, it's not like we're taught in school, or if we do have that childhood trauma, then it absolutely won't be there in our upbringing as examples. We have 7 different areas of our lives, and if they're left on autopilot to our subconscious beliefs, that's going to just, if we're getting a taste somewhere else and we're getting that good feeling, we're absolutely not going to want to explore that. And I'm using myself as, I can only speak from my own experience, and obviously what I know in my training, but that's really what kind of happens. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I'm so glad I joined this group, because this is actually happening to me right now. And I didn't know this was a thing related to trauma. I just thought, I'm really enjoying this. I don't really want to. You feel physically out of place sometimes, and then you just want to go back to your bhakti or your sadhana, or back to thoughts of Hari and Guru. So it's good that you were addressing this. I genuinely had no idea it was related to trauma.
Yes, no, thank you for sharing that. And I am really happy that you're taking such intense shelter. That's beautiful that you're doing that. There's definitely no nothing wrong with taking that shelter, but if we're not bringing it into that into the other areas, it's kind of Krishna will he will come in different ways. I can definitely speak from experience there and help us, because especially if we're in places where we don't have a lot of devotee association, and I think that there's quite a few people on here who have that, and I'm certainly one of those people as well. We are kind of put in these situations as beacons to connect with others, even if it's on a very, very subtle level. We're there to be beacons, and if we're not engaging in those other areas of life, we're not connecting to our full potency, full potential. But it's also, like I was saying, a way of negating that emotional world. So it definitely relates to trauma for sure. I hope that makes sense, and I am really glad that you're here.
I'm really glad to be here, and you're making absolute sense. Thank you so much.
Happy to hear that. Happy to hear that. Would anyone else like to share, or just share any reflection or comment? So, as we know, we've got that really famous verse in the Bhagavad Gita, and there's so many different examples, and I'm going to share just that beautiful verse. So it's, even if a man of knowledge acts according to his own nature, for everyone follows the nature he has acquired from the 3 modes, what can repression accomplish? And again, it's not like we're consciously, actively trying to repress our other needs. It's just that this is, we've kind of been told, or through example in our lives, that that's not acceptable to share, and this is where shadow work comes in. And so we just naturally kind of repress those other areas of our life. And again, this is where this cleaning comes up, and if we don't have those tools, this is kind of what can happen. We're just continuing to repress, and I promise you, Krishna will put you in a situation where it just has to come out. It really just has to come out. So the other example, which I really, really love this example, is Kardama Muni. He actually had a private darshan with Vishnu, and he didn't ask to, go back to the spiritual world and just connect in his spirit body. No, he asked for a wife because he knew where he was at. He was fully honest with himself, and he knew where he was at and what his desires were, and yeah, that he needed to engage them. Otherwise he wouldn't be satisfied, and he would need to take another birth. So for those that don't know that it's a reference from the Srimad Bhagavatam in the 3rd canto, I believe. You can reach out to someone who is taking care of Chant Now if you wanted to read more about that. It's a really, really beautiful pastime, really, really far out, particularly if you're a mystic. It's very cool. So yeah, just as I was saying, it's like this, we know that the practice is good for us. We know that there's so much support there, connection. We really, really feel that. We, connect with that bliss. But if underneath it all, we don't really know who we are, it's going to at some point end in trouble or just end in a really difficult or challenging situation. So I wanted to share some points on that just briefly, and then we'll open it back up to people if you wanted to share anything that's currently happening for you. So at some point, even if it's just, for a while, we get along with devotees or, people in our spiritual practice, or even our friends and our family, we're getting along with them. But at some point, we will likely feel that the principles that they're practicing in the tribe, we're not going to be able to keep up with. And we're likely going to feel a lot of guilt and shame around not being able to keep up with the other members of the tribe and not being able to fit in, and then breaking the principles and that we originally thought that we can keep. This is a really, really big one. And yeah, often we find that, people are falling out or falling away from the community. And there's just this conflict within that really we just don't know how to resolve within us. And there are a couple of things that happen as a result of this not feeling like we can fit in with the tribe. And again, this is it's very broad. Like I was explaining to Dava in the beginning, there's so, trauma, it's such a big topic. And there's so many different little avenues and things that we could explore. So I'm really trying to keep it general as much as possible, yet be personal with you. So one thing, and this is the worst one, is that, devotees, they will leave altogether and blame the tribe and blame the philosophy too. And they really just want to push away because that trauma filter is too strong. They are in too much pain. It is just too much. They need to push it away. And obviously this is, it's very sad when we, lose someone that we're connected with and they need to take another path. So that's one thing that happens when we can't fit in and those trauma filters are too strong. So the other thing is that we do start to create our own language and we feel confident in that. And we have some people that we can connect with, but underneath there's still some resentment, bitterness, anger, blaming. And what's happening is we are creating a language from those wounds. And this is called woundology. If you wanted to explore it more, I have a workbook that talks about it, but it's a term that's coined from Carolyn Miss. She explores it a little bit in terms of our energy body. So if you are someone who's been working with your trauma and really understanding it and identifying it and really kind of getting into it, so to speak, what's going to happen is if you don't have those tools to actually move out of it, which is very, very common, we end up identifying with the wounds and then creating a philosophy and a language around it that's still actually connected with the trauma filters, and it doesn't allow us to move forward on our spiritual evolution, whatever practice we're in, and it kind of keeps us stuck in that space. So just wanted to, connect back. Is there anyone who resonates with this or have any reflections or comments or questions or feedback also?
What about people who naturally their nature is, they are kind of like outsiders?
Yeah.
Because you have people who do try to kind of be different from the pack, you know, the lone wolves. So how does that also relate to people who are like that?
Yeah. So it's a good question. You know, it's definitely relate to people who are, you know, more kind of philosophical, and they're, you know, they're just kind of gauging the situation, gauging, you know, how to connect in with the tribe, with the practice, and connect with themselves, yeah, within that. Did you want to give more of an example of what you mean?
No, I just wanted your thoughts on that. But then also something that I've been thinking about personally is how do we move past the guilt? Because oftentimes it's like you're feeling like, okay, this may be something that I'm in my current situation, maybe I don't feel like I'm able to do, but the guilt is like really heavy, and then you're not able to move forward because you feel like this huge weight is on you.
I hear you. I totally hear you. It's such a good point, and it's so unfortunate, but it's something that really comes with having those trauma filters, is a lot of guilt and a lot of shame, and it's often why we want to actually cave and disconnect, because underneath that's what we're saying. And we are going to go very deep into it, because I know I'm touching on like a lot of pain points for people, and I'm just wanting to create that kind of space for everyone, you know, to really get that scope. But we are going to go very deep into, you know, being able to transform it. But I'll just address it quickly, is really understanding what you're saying to yourself, because there's very specific wounds, 21 core wounds, and core beliefs, or limiting beliefs. And there are very specific ones that actually connect with I'm bad, or I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy, and these create this guilt and shame. It's also when we have a lot of experiences in our past where we have wanted to share our authentic selves, and we've not been able to like, it's not been encouraged. It's been you know, we felt like we've had to suppress it. And so at that point, we're wanting to actually connect or like express that part of ourselves, but we're actually repressing it. So it's a step-by-step process of really connecting in with what you're saying to yourself. What core wound is it connected with? Is that actually true? So we'll go through this. I'm kind of jumping into it now, but I promise you we will absolutely go into this. Did that make sense, Steva?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I hope that did. And yeah, for people that are kind of just coming in, you know, I think that you're just coming into, you know, a Bhakti practice, you know, and they feel that these things are coming up, they might be hesitant to kind of to jump in. I think that that's a good thing. I think that that is, you know, not that you should be wary, but just to it's a sign of the mode of goodness that you're really thinking about it and seeing if I can really commit to this, if I can really, if this is something that I can commit to, if this is something I can practice every day, if it's not, then how much can I take on, things like that. So that's a really good sign. If you, yeah, I just wanted to come back to that point that you made beforehand, Deva. Is there anyone else that would like to share any reflections or experiences, or comment, or ask a question just before we move forward?
Enjoying this feeling of connection that we are sharing, I think is so precious and helpful to me, and I'm enjoying each and every word of yours. So thank you.
So welcome. So welcome, Kala. It's a pleasure to have you here. It's wonderful. I'm glad you're immersing in it, in the connection. It's nice to have these topics, and sometimes just to observe, you know, just to sit and observe and contemplate. It's nice, isn't it? I'm definitely one of those people too. just curious if anyone's had any experiences of feeling like they're getting power from those wounds. It's kind of like another step, excuse me, but feeling like they're, you know, ruminating in something, you know, negative, or, you know, fear. It's a big one, especially if you are really sensitive. It's a really, really big one. But something that comes to mind, and again, this isn't necessarily within the Bhakti Yoga community, just anyone, like you may have had an experience where you've just kind of met someone and kind of almost immediately they've gone into this situation and explaining the situation that happened to them, that's got quite a lot of emotional charge around it, and it's clear that they haven't processed it, and they're looking for this validation. And this is a kind of example of woundology and someone really, you know, identifying with their wounds and that trauma filter, and just not wanting to move past. And look, you know, it's not like these things are really, you know, it's actually, the steps to healing are simple, but it usually requires us to change and evolve, and that's what's really tricky, and it's scary. You know, it can be really, really scary. So Maya makes it seem scary, that's for sure. So if anyone wanted to share maybe an experience that they had, or if they, you know, if you want to be really honest, I was definitely someone who was getting power from my wounds. Oh my goodness, it was such a big pastime for me. Particularly, you know, things that happened in my childhood and not wanting to let that go, and really identifying with the stories. And yeah, so, but I also understand that it's, you know, it might be an intimate experience and not wanting to share that here. It's totally up to you.
I think sorry, go for it.
No, Deva, you go ahead.
No, it's okay, go for it.
I just want to probably add something. It's such an interesting and very, very nice conversations from Lalita, and I think each word of yours makes so much of sense, and so much of similarity to what each one of us must have experienced in our life, maybe in our childhood, teenage, depends. But I feel as soon as you start understanding what's your connection with the Almighty, with Krishna, you will get that sense automatically, or maybe through someone, that whatever happens in your life, there is a reason behind it. And once you analyze that, every single thing which happens, you know, that is a learning concept, because once you start flowing through Krishna's way of life, then you kind of understand that's all Krishna's arrangement. You know, that's what we say in our Krishna's culture. So it's I feel myself that way, like yes, I have myself handled so many traumas, so many challenges, but I feel very nice about the fact that self-healing comes naturally, and it has been there with me. I think that's how I surpass those moments. Now I feel much more powerful, yes, from my wounds. I would say definitely I agree with that point. Also, I feel that some people, even if they are devotees or non-devotees, they come in your life and there is a reason behind it. They sometimes come for a reason. And also, Krishna will align you with the right people. Yes, that's also correct. And that's something which I've experienced in my life. And that's very, very practical. So I think all these things are you know, comes naturally. I feel, yes, traumas are very, very difficult. They are scary. I'm myself a very sensitive person, and I know how I've surpassed those things. It's very challenging, especially because if you can't express these kind of things to everybody. But yes, I think if Krishna makes your way. Maybe if it takes time, he will make your way.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much for that reflection. It really shows the depth of your wisdom and your practice, and how much you're going inwards, and yeah, relying on that connection to move forward and face that. I love how you said it's like a natural process of self-healing and reflection and introspection. And I don't feel like that's natural for everyone. I think that there's a real skill and art to doing that. And I think it requires an immense amount of maturity on all levels, actually, but particularly mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. So fantastic. Congratulations. Jai ho. It's wonderful. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Lalita. I totally agree with you.
Beautiful.
Some people
Yes.
suggest that one should get therapy or medications for trauma and depression. So she wants to know if people who follow Bhakti, should they go for such treatments?
Well, it's very much up to the individual. It's a really good question. Thank you for sharing that. It's very much up to the individual. I can only speak from my own experience and realizations and training. I think that there are lots of different branches of therapy, and they all have their place in the world, and it really depends on where we are at, and what type of therapy is going to be helpful and supportive for us on our journey. It also comes back to the therapist or coach or counselor and the type of connection, the type of vibration, the type of consciousness that they have. And I'm not just talking about whether they're practicing spirituality or not, but are they actually speaking from authenticity? Have they actually worked through that? I've met so many psychologists who have absolutely no experience themselves, and they're not speaking from realized knowledge. It's just like they've got their degree and that's kind of it. And that's fine, you know, that's okay. If that's what they want to do, that's fine. There's no judgment here. But I've also met you know, and connected with devotees who, you know, don't have those qualifications, and they may have some experience, but without the proper tools, it can be incredibly dangerous. And again, re-triggering over and over and over again. Like, honestly, some of the advice that I was given when I first, not when I first started, but when I first got married, it was quite scary, actually. So I wouldn't wish that upon anyone else. So again, it's really, you know, trusting that connection within and your intuition. Remember, Srila Prabhupada wanted us to be, you know, independently thoughtful and not follow blindly. So that's a really important principle to come back to. I personally am very much against medications of any kind, but that's just my personal belief. I wouldn't say, oh, don't take this or don't do this to anyone. It's completely up to you and your experience. But I would be finding someone who can give you tools, who is willing and able to encourage, empower, and inspire you to look inwards and give you tools, not just encourage you to talk about your issues and challenges over and over again, but actually give you something you're walking away with and you're feeling encouraged and empowered. So, but yeah, there are some cases where people do need some types of medications to help them. But honestly, I've just found the pharmaceutical industry to really just mask things and to create money, you know, just money-making machine. And there's so much evidence and documentation of that. But again, it's up to the individual and what you feel you need at that particular time. I've had people say, yes, look, I just needed it for this amount of time, and it helped me to just get through this experience. But just know it's not going to be something that necessarily is going to help you to move forward and evolve. Yeah. Does that help you, Kalyani? Does that answer your question?
Yes, yes, Mantaji, it helped. Thank you so much.
You're so welcome. Yeah, it's a really good question. Really good question. Is there anyone else that would like to
Raul has his hand up, and I still have a question also.
Yes, sure. Okay, let's get into it. Rahul, please.
Thank you. I'm feeling encouraged to share in this nice association of like-minded devotees. So I felt very fortunate to interact with the devotee. I mean, a couple of devotees. We have some from some sessions, Zoom sessions, some devotees from ISKCON or Silicon Valley, and someone from ISKCON Mayapur. So I mean, I have interacted with few householders and all. They mentioned that although they are practicing very nicely, their family lives aren't as perfect or as loving as they may have thought. So, you know, and somebody from Mayapur, that person is originally from Russia. I just have some contacts, like just hi, hello kind of friendships, virtual friendships that I'm having. So that person had earlier mentioned she had a bad, a marriage and all that was very bad, and the abusive husband and all. I just came all that to know. Then she formed some friends with some devotee in ISKCON, like in Mayapur, and even that ended bad. And she is like a full-time engaged in helping others become happy, do Hari Nams and all. So I was feeling like there are some people, we need some examples. So I may feel my life situation is not the 100% perfect, but when I see like devotees having to undergo more challenges than me, then it's and still it's not just they are tolerating, but they are doing intense devotional service, taking intense shelter of Guru Krishna. And I may have even the smallest of thing with myself, and then I would say get into complaining mode more. Why couldn't the most benevolent Krishna do better and all? And to see those examples, I was hearing like Mahaprabhu came to demonstrate the process, but it's not just the chanting. We need living examples. So it's great fortune if I felt like this as Krishna's mercy heading towards Janmashtami. Like we can see the good qualities. All good qualities come from Krishna, and by appreciating the kindness or the tolerance and the sincerity of devotees around, so it helped me feel like there are good people in this world, but not all have the good fortune of being with all the good people, but there are still good devotees, and I have some friendships with them. So it helps me to feel fortunate and inspired. Thank you.
Oh, that's beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that. Yeah, it is very kind of humbling and heart-opening, I think, when we can really connect with others and have compassion for others that are experiencing something very challenging in their lives, and then we can reflect it upon our situation, and it can kind of be inspiring that, wow, they're going through so much, they've got so much strength, they're going so deep, and they're really in it at the moment. And yeah, it's an inspiration, definitely, if you can take it that way, for sure. It's really, really, really powerful, really beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that.
There's something that Rahul just mentioned, how, reflecting on someone else's situation and then re-reflecting on our own situation, and the intention then being taken, okay, wow, my situation is not so bad. But then on the other hand, we also advise, or like, at least for myself, I know that comparing myself with others is not very conducive. So with that being said, does it come down to the intention?
Yeah, it's a really, really, really good question. Absolutely, really good question. I think as long as we're considering ourselves, like, it's really about having that boundary with self, or really understanding yourself. And if you're considering yourself in the situation, like when you're comparing, it's like with a compassionate heart. I think Kalyani's writing something about having compassion. So I'm just gonna.
He says, staying compassionate and being positive always helps. Really very nice and informative session. Thank you, Lalita, for sharing your wisdom and mentoring us in such important topics. They're very rarely discussed, and it was really helpful.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for that feedback. That's lovely. I'm really happy to hear that. Happy to be of service. And yeah, I think it's really important to just consider yourself. Like, it's like we were talking about last time. I think we kind of touched on that point, Deva, of that intention. What is your intention in it? And if we're looking at envy, obviously it's not the most wonderful emotion to have, which is kind of what comes up. But there's jealousy is in the mode of passion, where we're wanting to compare, and envy is like in the mode of ignorance, where we're really wanting to, like, it's very destructive. So if we're looking at it through a compassionate lens, and just really not minimizing or suppressing our needs, at any way. We're just actually considering ourselves. It's real empathy. I actually just did a little post on this on my my Instagram about the difference between sympathizing and empathizing. And sympathizing is really where we're you know, putting ourselves in someone else's shoes, but it's like it's like seeing someone bleeding and cutting ourselves too. It's like really just sitting in it. There's no solution. There's, you know, nothing. But empathizing is really like, hey, this is where I'm at. This is what I can offer. I fully like love and connect with myself and my spiritual practice. And I can see you're struggling and suffering. And wow, I really admire you for what you're doing, what you're going through. That's incredible. You know, that's amazing. And this is what I could, you know, could offer. Because I'm connected to myself and I'm meeting my own needs. So yeah, does that help?
Yeah, I think that the point that you brought up, I think there's a very fine line for some people. And oftentimes you can think that you're empathizing, but you're actually sympathizing. Or sometimes it's like a combination of the two. So it's
absolutely,
it can be very interesting.
It's such a good point, Deva, such a good point. And I think especially if we are still working through those trauma filters, we have this way of like projecting onto other people our stuff, and as a way of like working through it, and really like they are going through something that's very similar, but we're not actually how to say, if we are considering ourselves, we'll be asking them questions and getting to know specifically what's happening in their situation, as opposed to going, oh my God, I went through that too, and this is what happened, and oh my God, you're feeling all these things. And yeah, so there it's very subtle. It's very, very, very subtle. It's such a good point. We absolutely need to do this, particularly in the beginning, but we need to have a framework and a language to be able to move out of that. Like, right? Because this shouldn't be the base.
The point that I first had a question about.
Yes. So it's like this shouldn't be the basis for the relationship, that all this stuff happened and that stuff, you know, happened to me, and this is kind of where codependency takes place, and you're really relying on each other in very unhealthy ways, because we're not connected with our authentic self. We're just saying, okay, this happened to me, so you need to be aware of that, and you need to take that into consideration. And the person might be walking on eggshells around you, or whatever it is. There's lots of different, you know, scenarios of that. But like the, you know, the type of, you know, Alcoholics Anonymous and, you know, trauma survivor groups, and don't get me wrong, they're wonderful, they have a place. But if we don't move beyond that, we're not evolving spiritually, right? We're not evolving, we're not moving forward. And this is what usually happens, like within communities like ours. When that does happen, we need that love and affection and connection to be seen and heard and understood, and those needs that weren't met during those traumatic experiences. But at some point we need to learn to give that to ourselves. And this is where it gets tricky with therapy, because we can rely also upon that, and it's just deepening that woundology consciousness, and we're not moving forward. So yeah, really, really good points. Excellent points. I hope that makes sense. Yeah.
Would you say it also depends on each person, like a time frame? Like some person A, it may require only that they need to speak or share their wounds or their experiences for one day, and then they're able to ideally they're able
very hypothetical there, Deva.
And then for person B, you know, it could take 5 years, and then person C, it could take, you know, 20 years, where they actually need to, their feeling is that they need to talk about it more because of lack of validation, etc. Do you think that there is merit to that, or no?
Yeah, it's a really good question. It's very individual, and really, you know, comes back to consciousness. And I think, I don't know, the one thing that kind of came to mind as you were asking that is our tribe is usually a great reference for that, and how much they're willing to continue to give. And if they feel that they can't, this is usually an indication that we need to then start. But if we're looking at from like a therapy model, we should absolutely be from the get-go. Straight away, we should be given those tools, or language should be created immediately. That those tools, like I work with clients for 6 months, I have a program, and straight away, we just don't go into the stories. I'm constantly making sure that we're checking, we're going in, and I'm giving them those tools all the way throughout. But I'm not asking them to share. I want them to share, but I'm wanting them to also take responsibility, because if we're not given that, because at the end of the day, we are in an adult body. We're not in a child body anymore. We're in an adult body, and that, you know, it is in the past. And we need to learn to give to ourselves. Otherwise, we're never going to change. And it's just, we're going to not connect with Krishna. We're not going to have loving, these beautiful, loving exchanges. There's so much out there for us to be able to experience. And we're stopping ourselves from doing that. So, yeah, does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Really
I have
good
another question. It's just, if anyone else, because it's already 4:15. So if anyone else wants to share something or ask a question, then if Lalita, you probably have something else that you want to share, move past this point.
There's so much. It's wonderful. No worries. If anyone else would like to share, or say anything. So I think I really loved your questions, David. They're just really powerful, really beautiful. I think everyone's kind of immersing in them. But any more points on wounds, or how you're getting power from? Yep, sorry, go forward.
One question, please. Sorry to interrupt. I was trying to form a segue and continue the discussion of the repression which you mentioned, and go deeper into that segment. My last, the realization of that which I shared was about the tolerance, the devotees tolerating the adversities in their lives and going on strongly with their devotional practice. So you mentioned about repression. So I was getting a bit confused. The urges, like we need to tolerate some, it's told like, the lust, anger, greed are the gateways to hell. So we need to tolerate the urges, even of our speech. And there are so many urges that we need to tolerate, and situations also. Sometimes it's about, it's, the Bhagavad Gita is more teaching the, as per my understanding, more about tolerance. So how do you differentiate with it with repression, which you told that repression can't accomplish anything? Sorry if it's not that clear.
No, really good question. Amazing question. Very on point. And there's a difference between controlling and repressing. There's a really great talk with Bhakti Goswami. He's fantastic. Highly recommend listening to any of his lectures. He's wonderful. And he talks about this and how really it's about understanding that boundary with yourself. And are you considering yourself in each situation? How are you considering yourself and connecting with yourself in that situation? Or are you repressing your emotional world, your mental world, just to kind of get on with it and connect and go forward? So what happens when we repress? A whole bunch of emotions are going to come up at some point, to take us off kilter. But if we're controlling, then we can just go, okay, all right, I can see, yes, the mind is hankering for this, or I'm feeling a little bit disturbed today, or, this person did this and it really bugged me. And you can kind of tolerate, there's not that emotional charge around it. Does that make sense? That, it's very, very brief. It's definitely something we can go deeper into, because it's such a huge topic in and of itself. But we're really just wanting to consider ourselves and our own needs. Really, this is where it comes back to understanding ourselves. And Hannah, thank you for your love heart and sharing the link to that. I'm assuming it's to that class that I was mentioning. So does that help, Rahul? I hope that answers a little. Yes, thank you for your thumbs up, Hannah. I'm so happy you're here.
So I just want to clarify that what you're saying is the consideration of ourselves is kind of like the the point where we'll be aware whether we're spiritually bypassing or where we're actually focused in our spiritual life. Like we're actually tolerating, we're actually doing something with the best intentions and not from a wound. Is that correct?
Yes, that's it. Because when there's that insane emotional charge around something, that's when we know, okay, we've and it really depends on the situation. It's so specific, but that's when we know, okay, I've repressed something, a boundary's been violated. Either I've violated, someone else has, haven't even had the chance to do that. I haven't considered myself in this situation. And particularly with spiritual bypassing, it will be a self-violation. So it's a boundary that will violate by, giving too much energy out or helping someone out when we really don't have the energy, or, we're having that conundrum or that conflict within, and we're feeling guilt and shame. Shouldn't I be helping that person? Like, isn't that why that's why I'm practicing Bhakti? Like, shouldn't I already be on that level? It's like this huge just disconnect from ourselves and our needs and how we can access that. And so yeah, it's a really, really good question. It's definitely, it's a huge one. It's a really big one.
Very difficult sometimes to be aware of.
Huge. And yeah, we're going to get into that though now. Did you want to ask your question and then we can go into the final stage so that we're not keeping everyone here? Oh wow.
So you brought up the point, that once we're kind of aware of our wound or we're sharing it, we can get power from it. We can stay in it, we can ruminate. And we can live in those shadows, build a nice cave. And then afterwards, you brought up the point that we are not, that we're not who we are. Like the wound is not who we are. But I would like to get some clarification on that, because someone who's experienced whatever type of trauma, that is impacting the type of person they are, even on a psychological level. Children who were neglected in the first 2 months, are mentally, their brain waves are different to children who had, love and care. So
yep.
How can we, what is the line between saying that this is not me, but this has impacted me? Because although we may move past it, hopefully at some stage, won't it still have some impact on the way, or do you feel that the tools that we can receive, through proper training can really help us to get to like a normal stage?
I love how you've done this. Very good. Because what is normalcy?
Yeah, what is normal?
Really, yeah. No, amazing questions. I love your questions so much. Yeah, so I love this point about authenticity. And I believe that, we've all come here for a very special reason, even though, in our practice, we're, material energy and we're trying to realize the soul, but we all have a purpose, we all have a reason. And I firmly believe that our experiences, good or bad, traumatic or healthy or secure, they really create that. And if we're really able to harness them and not allow them to be using us, instead we're using them, it can become a superpower, right? It can become this incredible superpower. So it's like, okay, we have, from 0 to 7 or 0 to 8, actually, when we come in, we're in this state of hypnosis, actually. So we're really just soaking everything up, right? And if those are like really intense things, and we're making it mean I'm abandoned, I'm unworthy, you know, I'm never going to be seen, I'm never going to be heard, I'm never going to be understood, or whatever we're making it mean that's impacting us. There is authenticity, there is that spark, that spirit soul underneath that, and that's what's coming out, because it's like when we're wanting to connect, that we're wanting to express that authenticity as a young child perhaps, or maybe in an intimate relationship, then if there wasn't that authenticity, what would be being repressed? Right? So we have that nature. Does that make sense? I feel like I'm not quite hitting the mark. I can see there's a little question mark on your face.
Yeah, a little bit.
So same with guilt and shame, right? Say you're always wanting to talk about, you know, personal development or spirituality, and no one in your family would ever hear and see. They would, and sometimes they would just maybe dismiss you or put you down even, right? But where did that come from in the beginning? Where did that expression come from? It came from your soul.
Spirituality? Yeah.
Just that topic. It doesn't have to be that topic. It could be about food. It could be about space. It could be about wanting to be a dolphin trainer. Like, where does that come from? It comes from the soul. It comes from us. Because we're unique. There's no one else like us. It's just, and Krishna made it that way, and all of our experiences in the material energy, you know, created that, and those propensities. And yes, those traumas do impact us, and those, you know, external forces, absolutely, they do shape, but there's still that spark underneath, and that's being shaped because of that. And there's always a positive, there's always a transcendental element to that, that's helping us. Like I explained in the, you know, in the other the part 1 talk, like, you know, my experience in Bhakti led me to have this huge mental, emotional, physical breakdown. My goodness, who would expect that to happen? I certainly was not expecting that to happen, but I wouldn't have it any other way, because it's brought me to this point, connecting with all you beautiful souls and meeting all these beautiful people in the place that I live, and supporting them, and not through knowledge but through wisdom, because I have been through it. I know, you know. So I hope that answers your question. I kind of feel like I went a bit off topic, but I understand.
It's like whenever, you know, our philosophy is like, I think Kaku was saying earlier, that we can very much understand that whatever is happening for a reason. You know, some might say that it's our karma. So then I've reflected, okay, so if this has happened to me, maybe, you know, previously I may have been a bit immature and have done this exact same thing or something similar to someone else. So now this deep impression is within me that I wouldn't want to have anyone else, or I would not want to put the same experience on another person. So that's one thing that I can appreciate from what I've been through, but it's also, you know, it's not
the proof and evidence on that side of the, or that column, is not so strong yet.
Yeah, and it's like, it's not that fulfilling. You know, it's like, okay, yeah, that's great, but
I hear you. No, it's a really, really good point. And I think the more we embrace, you know, that self-healing journey, and seeing how it's all connected, you know, with those tools, there are those moments of joy. But I do understand what you're saying, and, you know, and that's really a sign that those trauma filters are still strong. And look, I'm you know, I'm not out of the woods yet either. You know, it takes time. It really takes time, and especially if we've had that childhood trauma. Whew, it's definitely an experience, a challenge, but so beautiful. And just to see how Krishna shows up, it's really far out, really far out, actually. I can't wait for that to happen for you more and more. So did anyone want to share anything else before we move forward? It's just like 2 quick points. I can see quite a few people have already dropped off. anyone else wanted to share anything, you're more than welcome. I'm really happy everyone shared and could connect, and we're, you know, we're seeing and hearing at each other. And just, you know, one thing I also wanted to just mention on that topic is, you know, we all come in with our baggage, and, you know, it's so unique, and so it can be so beautiful, those loving exchanges that we can have with others, hopefully, but also with ourselves, and really just going deep and yeah, connecting that with Krishna in some way, shape or form, and feeling that reciprocation from divinity, from supreme, from universe, what, you know, whatever name. The other thing that will be really prominent is the complete inability to receive. And I noticed this so much. I can see it more and more as I move forward. But what happens is the trauma filters really impact our ability to receive, because if we've got those, you know, those beliefs saying, well, you're not good enough, you know, you're not worthy enough, you know, people are just going to abandon you anyway, so why would I open up to that? You know, if we've got all of these beliefs, and the more, you know, the longer we've had them there for, the more they're going to be kind of squashed and impacted in, and we'll have these really kind of subtle, tricky ways of being expressed and kind of catching us up. So, but in our culture, we're taught we're more humble than a blade of grass. They're really important things to come back to. Is everything okay with the recording?
I ran out of space, so I just shifted some stuff around and I started again.
Okay. No problem at all. I guess you can connect them back together in the editing. So let me, there we are. Okay, so the healing steps are actually very simple, but like all healing, it requires immense courage and determination. And again, for the longer those trauma filters have been there, the more challenging, and they will just trick us, because we're so used to betraying and abandoning and neglecting ourselves, and diminishing our self-worth and putting ourselves last. So it's really important that we, you know, just celebrate any small win. Okay, really celebrate any small win. Okay, so the first step is to observe your emotions as feedback for how I can further my self-healing journey. So even if it's a trigger, and you can just write, so you don't have to write all of this, but just observe your emotions as a feedback mechanism to go inside. Okay, so even if you're getting really triggered, just sit with the emotion afterwards. You don't have to do it. You might not be able to do it in real time yet. You might not be at that stage where you can go, oh, I'm noticing this and this is happening, or I notice this is coming up again. And you might not be there yet, and that's perfectly okay. There might be some areas of your life where you can do that, and in others you can't. It's still too triggering. It's still too much. So emotion is just energy in motion. Okay, it's really just there as feedback. It's not something that we should be identifying with as who we are. And it's scary, it's tricky, and we kind of have been taught in our society, and I'm not talking about in our spiritual practices, although we may have perceived it that way, but just in material society, it's very much about looking externally, not looking internally, and anything internally or anything where I have to change, it can be very confronting, and there's a lot of fear around that, particularly if we've been getting energy in a way, for a certain time, particularly around trauma wounds, or getting energy from our wounds. So absolutely, it's a really, really big one. So observing the emotion as feedback for how I can further my self-healing journey. So you can word it differently, but just really making sure I'm going to observe every time I feel a strong emotion or emotional charge, or I feel myself getting triggered, I'm going to try and remember, this is just feedback. My spirit, my soul is offering me feedback right now. It's just offering me feedback for what's happening and how I can improve. How I can improve my spiritual journey, how I can improve my relationships, my career, my physical health, whatever it may be, okay? So the second one, what story am I telling myself? What am I saying to myself in this moment? Okay, so there are so many different scenarios here that we can look at. So the most common one is when we're triggered by something someone else has done, and we're usually telling ourselves a story and making what they have done mean something that it doesn't mean. Okay, so and we can explore that a little bit together. But another one is when we're going along about our day and everything's fine, and then the next minute we just notice that we're feeling really crappy, and we might be feeling really, really scared, or just really, really angry. And this is usually easier to kind of observe and connect with. But really, what am I saying to myself? What am I saying to myself right now? So an example would be something like that. Randomly, you might be saying to yourself, "Oh, I'm never going to be, a good parent, or I'm never going to be a good partner." You could literally be saying that to yourself inside your head. Yeah. So catching yourself, really, really being aware of what it is that you're saying to yourself. Okay, I hope that makes sense. I'll just quickly go through the other 3 points, and then we can go back to that one, because that's quite a big one. So the third one is the story true? Is what you're saying to yourself about the situation, about yourself, whether past or present or future, is this true? Is this actually true? Am I really, inherently, am I a bad person? Am I, am I a really bad partner inherently? No, you might have done some things, you've made some mistakes, but am I inherently? So really challenging it. And look, depending on where you're at in your journey, when you ask yourself what the story is, there may be a lot of emotion around it, and there's a process of needing to be able to self-soothe. So I have a course, I'll talk about this afterwards, but I do have a course that really takes you through some beautiful meditations and really helps you to explore this in terms of self-soothing and moving beyond that. But you may, if you are in the beginning stages, or even if you're not, you've been on the journey for a while, and something's coming up in your life that is really intense, and you're needing that self-soothing. So I would absolutely self-soothe first, and then start the challenge. You need to not be triggered when you're challenging the story. But the more you repeat this, you'll find that even amidst immense emotion, like even panic attacks, you'll be able to go through these points and get great results. Okay, really, really, really powerful results. Really important tools to have. Okay, so the fourth one is, so once we understood what we're saying to ourselves, we're saying that is absolutely not true. I'm not inherently bad. I'm not an inherently bad partner or a bad parent or whatever it is. And then if this is something that keeps coming up, which usually it will be, we need to find proof and evidence of how it's not true. Okay, so if you're if the story is, "Oh, I'm never good enough, I'm just never going to be good enough for this person," or "I'm never going to be good enough to be able to do that particular thing," or whatever it is that you're saying to yourself. And if we are experiencing a lot of fear and a lot of emotion, you might have to sit with this for quite some time. Yeah, really quite some time to really challenge it and really get to the point of what it is that you're saying to yourself. And this is where, support and therapy and coaching can come in and be a really, really, really helpful tool. So finding proof and evidence of how that story isn't true. So things like with "I'm not good enough," with that particular core wound, it's a really, really easy one to shift. It's a very common one. It's a really easy one to shift. It can just be done through words of affirmation. Whereas self-worth, unlovable, that I'm defective, there's something wrong with me, or abandoned alone, or they need to be really, reprogrammed or challenged through action, which is another, another step, but still it will work with these steps. So finding that proof and evidence. So if we say I'm good enough because I get up and brush my teeth in the morning, like it can really be that simple. It doesn't need to be this like intense, creative, complex thing. It can just be as simple as that. So really finding that proof and evidence of how it's not true, how that story that you're telling yourself is not true. So the fourth one is, what would be the impact if I held onto this belief? So what would my life look like if I keep holding on to this belief, if I keep telling myself that I'm not good enough, I keep telling myself that I'm not worthy, or if I'm, I'm always going to be abandoned, or whatever it may be? What's the impact? What's actually going to happen in my life? You may not ever have a, deep loving exchanges with other people, or to attract a relationship, or, to get that good career, or, whatever it may be that's, currently lacking in your life. So those are the four points. So just check in. Does anyone have anything they want to share, any reflections, any questions, any points where you would like to go deeper? Yeah, it's a huge thing, and it takes lots of practice. The mind, as we know, it's so tricky, isn't it? So tricky.
I know I'm jumping ahead, but could you share something, just a little bit, about the action for some of the deeper ones? Like maybe one thing that could be possibly done?
Sure. So particularly for self-worth, which if we have childhood trauma, this will massively just be at the crux of it all. And it's really just a big thing that I think culturally, and not even, Bhakti yoga culture or spiritual culture, I'm just talking about like the material cultures that we live in, it's just really massively lacking. So it's so personal, but I found in my journey, it was very much observing that self-loathing when I was really depressed or morose, or really berating myself, or feeling really angry, or really just observing that and saying beautiful, loving words of affirmation, like even just, I love you, you're worthy of love, but then having it with an action. So for me, it's usually, it was just not wanting to take care of myself. And that's usually what it would be. So it was just like maybe eating junk food or something, or not doing exercise, or not showing up in ways that I would when I'm like in more goodness states, or feeling better about myself. So it's like, actually, I am so worthy of love that I'm gonna do this. I'm absolutely gonna do this workout, or I'm going to sit and chant. I'm going to just sit with myself and hear what it is that I need to say right now. That's an action for self-worth, or reprogramming that and connecting with self-worth. So yeah, does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you so much.
You're welcome. It's very personal for each person. It's very, very personal. Would anyone else like to share any points, or have any reflections or questions or comments or feedback?
Oh, I just wanted to say thank you for sharing these points. I felt my intelligence saying yeah, and my mind feeling scared. How about that?
Good. That's awesome. Good on you. That's fantastic.
Language can create consciousness, and I felt like that, exactly like that. These words can help us to express ourselves as souls beyond the mind and the body. So thank you so much.
You're so welcome. I'm really happy that came across, and thank you for bringing it back to that first point about how language creates consciousness. And because we've gone into that little journey of really connecting in and going in, and what we're saying to ourselves and how that's creating our consciousness. And if we're catching that and being aware of that, how we can shift it. Definitely with fear, for sure. It's a big one, isn't it? It's a really, really big one. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much. Would anyone else like to share anything? It's been a big session.
Yeah, I was just looking at it now.
Had to take 2 recordings.
Pippa's got a hand up.
Yes, Kubash, please share.
Okay, so like this is the fact that you guys are holding this event is just a clear sign of Hari and Guru's grace, because no matter how many years it's been since the trauma ends, you still hear those voices that you heard back when it was actually happening. That negative self-talk about yourself and all of that. And like once you go into Bhakti, you realize that those thoughts don't make Hari and Guru happy. So like it's in a way it feels like a form of self-harm to feel those emotions about yourself. So I'm really thankful for this, because I'm tired of self-harming in the mind. It's not productive anymore. Like it's time to put those voices away and just move on, you know?
Thank you, lovely. Thank you so much for sharing and being vulnerable and open. And I hear it's just like, it's so frustrating, isn't it? It gets to this point where it's just, you're so tired of going through this cycle. And it is a type of, it is a type of like, you know, sabotage or like berating. It's so harsh. It's like, oh my goodness. And just to kind of add to that, when we have that childhood trauma, I mean, even when we have that childhood trauma, we actually, how our parents used to speak to us, that becomes our inner voice. That becomes how we treat ourselves. So if that's obviously in a really intense, harsh experience that we've had, or a neglect, maybe they've neglected, there's different types of wounds. I have a video on this. I haven't put it into my blog yet, but I'll leave my details in the chat and you're welcome to access that. But yeah, the different types of mother wound and kind of how we treat ourselves. Yeah, and that's kind of what I'm hearing. And it's beautiful that you're connecting with Guru and Krishna, because this is ultimately what we need to do. Is they're our real parents, right? Because we're the Atman. Yeah, they're our real parents, not our material birth parents who are playing that role, but they're just fallible soldiers like all of us. So it sounds like you're really trying to do that, which is perfect. It's really beautiful, really, really perfect. But I would say that it's not that they're unhappy with you. You know, it's not that. And I really, I know that feeling so well. And I used to go through this space of not even wanting to go to my Guru's Vyasa Puja, because I would just felt so unworthy. Like I'm doing all of these things that are, you know, I'm not going to the temple, I'm not getting up at 4 a.m. and oh my goodness, I'm in so much mire, and oh, how can I even show up? I'm like so, and constantly this would just go over and over and over again. But if we're connecting with that wound, we're challenging that, because Krishna, like, oh my God, he sees what's in our heart, and that intention to come closer, that devotion, right? It's not seeing of all of these bad things. That's our kind of, you know, that's our kind of imposing material energy, you know, on the situation. He's not looking at it like that. And still it shocks me. I actually had an experience just this morning that really completely blew my mind. Anyway, I'll maybe share a little bit later, but it's just how much he's there within our heart, and just with open arms, you know, wanting to receive us, embrace us. Like, it's unconditional love. And it's hard for us to really fathom that when we haven't had those experiences. The more you, challenge those stories. What am I saying to myself? And hey, is this true? Yeah.
It feels like a tug of war sometimes, like with the mind, and trying to, like, I'm not these thoughts aren't even true. Like, yeah.
Contact me afterwards. I'll leave my Instagram handle and my email. And I think you hopefully you still have my WhatsApp, and I can share the chart of the core wounds, and this can help you to and of course, if anyone else wants that, you're welcome to reach out, but this can help you to trace it back to what you're actually saying to yourself, and then tracing it back to the belief. Okay, this is the belief that it connects with. I'm actually saying this, even though the story is like this, I'm actually saying this to myself. And then we can really start getting into that proof and evidence of how that's not true. Another point is, especially, bless you, you've got all of this beautiful, like loving, vulnerable energy, and so much need to like feel validated and connected, and that's self-soothing. So if you do want to jump into that course, it's really designed for this, my tune in immersion course. So we go through the lower self and the 5 core lower self needs, and then we go into the higher self and the 7 higher self needs, and then integrating the 2 and how you can bring this into your practice. It's amazing. I created it specifically for this. It's like 10 minutes of just going through, or 5 to 10 minutes of just going through a workbook together in a video, and then a guided meditation. So it's no more than like 20-30 minutes each day, and it goes for 11 days. Of course, you don't have to do it for 11 days straight, but it's just there as a framework to kind of, that's the thing with healing and healing trauma. It's like, where is the beginning and where is the end, right? And this is so important, even just as a somatic resource, to have a beginning and to have an end. Like when we, and this is, you were talking about fear and how this was a lot, and maybe this is coming up because you don't have activities in your life that have a clear beginning and have a clear end. So maybe bringing that into your life as well, where you can even just an exercise. Okay, I'm going to do 7 sun salutations, for example, and being really clear, this is the beginning and this is the end. This really, really helps as a somatic resource. So really feeling and connecting with ourselves. I hope that was helpful. You're so welcome. Thank you for being open and vulnerable.
I have put up your healing journey. I've put your Instagram in the chat, as well as the link to the types of mother wounds. But I don't know how, which do you want to put, which email address? Is it the one that you gave me, or is there another email address that people can contact you on?
Yeah, so it's I'll just pop it in. Thank you so much for that, David. You're such a you're so onto it with your admin. It's wonderful. It's such a good skill. I think okay, so just put that in as well. So that's my email. You're more than welcome to reach out to me there. Where there's like a bajillion different avenues where we can reach each other. So any of them is fine, whatever works for you. So would anyone else like to share anything before we come to a close? Share any of your experiences, just wanting to clarify any of the points.
We just want to say thank you for everyone who stayed on. And thank you, Lalita, for sharing all your wisdom and experience with us. And just to clarify the last point that you said, for the document, I suppose, with the core wounds, can anyone who's interested just email you and you'll send it to them like that?
Absolutely. Just reach out. There's a whole bunch of workbooks that I have. There's a whole bunch of free resources that I have. So you're always welcome to reach out at any point. I'm here for you. It's my pleasure to be of service. Thank you. And thank you for your wonderful questions. All right. Have a wonderful day, evening, afternoon, morning, wherever you're tuning in from. I'm going to go to sleep now.
I hope that you can rest well.
Yes, I'm sufficiently tired. I think I was very excited in the last one. Lots of things ruminating. And also, if you wanted to reach out with any points that you wanted me to discuss in the future, or has asked me to do some regularly. So if you have any thoughts or points that we could expand upon, and create something out of, please reach out for that as well. Definitely.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Ciao.
Thank you, Lisa.